I want to share one of the most intriguing stories I have heard. Um, the story is called King Lavana and the Sorcerer, and it's from an ancient Indian text called YogaVasishta. Um, and nobody really knows the exact age of the writing, but it's believed to be somewhere between the 6th and the 14th centuries AD, but some version of this may have existed much before this. But anyway, the story goes that there was this king whose name was Lavana, and he lived uh, in a kingdom which just adored him. He was wealthy, he was powerful, his enemies were afraid of him, and he was a self-realized man, and he was compassionate to his subjects, and there was all the love and attention and wealth that he wanted in the world that was available to him. So one afternoon, King Lavana was sitting in his courtyard along with his ministers and a bunch of people from around the country had come to display their skills, and this king was a very generous king, so he would give them prizes at the display of every skill and act. And so there was a long queue of people who were there trying to display their skills. And King Lavana was watching at one particular man in this crowd intently. This man seemed unlike any other person there. He looked very scholarly, and he had a very strange and deep look in his eyes, and he was dressed like an ascetic. And there was something about this man that King Lavana found very intriguing. So he finally called this man and said, "Sir, I don't know who you are, but what is that you would like to demonstrate to us?" And this man, this ascetic, said, "I am a sorcerer, and I am here to display my skills as a sorcerer." And King Lavana said, "Well, I have seen lots of skills and magic in my lifetime. What is that you're going to display that I have not seen before? Are you going to cut somebody in half and put them together? Are you going to make a rope become a ladder? I have seen all of those tricks." And the sorcerer laughed and said, "Those are things that kids play with, and I'm here for something else." And King Lavana said, "Yeah, okay then, I'm ready. Just demonstrate what you have to show." And the sorcerer said, "Look into my eyes." And King Lavana looked into the sorcerer's eyes. And in that instant, the palace, the gold, the queen that was sitting next to him, the ministers, everything disappeared. And he found himself in an empty plain, and there was a forest that seemed all dried up at a distance. But in this big empty plain, there was a horse that seemed extraordinarily beautiful. And King Lavana somehow had this feeling in the middle of all of this confusion about where he was right now. He had this desire to capture that horse, and somehow he felt that capturing that horse would take him back to his kingdom and his place of comfort. So he starts running after the horse, and the horse is very fast, and finally Lavana manages to jump on the horse, and a strange thing happens. The horse begins to fly, and it soars high above the ground and straight into the forest. And the tree branches everywhere, and King Lavana is ducking his head to make sure he's not hurt. And ultimately, there is that point where the branches are so thick that he has to reach out and protect himself, and he finds himself hanging on a tree branch, and the horse flies away. Now it's kind of late in the evening. He doesn't know where he is, so Lavana decides to spend his night on that tree and find his way back to his kingdom in the morning. So the morning he wakes up and climbs down the tree, and he sees that this entire place is parched. There is no greenery, no fruits, no sign of water, and he's thirsty and he's hungry. So he starts walking, hoping to find some place where he could eat, find somebody who would feed him. And he walks for 3 days. He's a strong man, but by the end of the third day, there is nothing left in him. So, out of hunger and thirst, he falls down, and he's about to die. And right around that time, he sees a shadow, and he looks up and sees a horrible looking woman, a forest woman, and she looks grotesque. But what he notes, what King Lavana notes, is that in her hand she has a pot of water and a pot of food of some sort. And so he begs her, says, "Please give me food." And this lady, she says, "No, I won't give it to you. You look like a king. I'm of a very low caste. I am a forest woman. If I give food to you, then I will be cursed, and I will be sentenced to spend my eternity in hell." And the king is desperate, so he says, "Please, I'm not a king. I'm just a forest person like you. I'm a woodcutter. Please give me food. I'm dying." And that lady refuses to believe him, and finally she says, "The only way you can get food from me and water from me is if you marry me, because if you do marry me, then you become one of my caste, one of my tribe, and at that point I can feed you, take care of you." And the woman's father passes by at that time, and King Lavana repeats the request for food, and he says to this girl's father, to this woman's father, "Can I marry your daughter?" And the man says, "You want to marry her? Well, if you really want to marry her, I have nothing to say. Go ahead. But I must warn you, she's got a bad temper." But King Lavana, in his desperation, says, "Fine, I'll marry her." So the marriage is solemnized then and there, and then she gives him the water and some of the food that she is carrying, and he regains his strength, but now he's her lawfully wedded husband, so he goes with her and stays with her, and all this time he's thinking about, how am I going to get back to my palace, to my queen, to my children, but he's bound by duty now because he's married to this woman. So he goes and lives with her in the hut, and this is a really difficult forest for them because there's hardly any food. The only way he can make a living is cut wood and carry it over a long distance to a faraway town, and sell the wood and bring back food, buy food and bring it back. So he starts that routine. Life is difficult. He has, over a period of time, 3 children. All 3 are boys, and this lady whom he has married is an extraordinarily mean human being. She's very cruel to him. She berates him at every possible opportunity, yells at him, throws things at him, and life is miserable. But um, being bound by duty and thankful and grateful for her saving his life, he continues to do all the necessary things that a husband would do. And unfortunately for him, the first two children turn out to be just like their mother. They are lazy, they are arrogant, and they yell, and they are absolutely ungrateful. Life goes on. The boys are now 16, 17, and the youngest one is 10. And there is a miserable famine in this land, a terrible famine. Every last bit of water uh, in the forest is dried up. Their livestock are all dead. There is no greenery left. So the woman, his wife, is giving him hell. And she says, we cannot stay here. We need to go somewhere. And he says, fine. And the boys notice that their father is too old and is not going to be able to provide for them any longer. So they just leave and walk away. So now it's Lavana and his wife and the 10-year-old that are walking. And the 10-year-old is Lavana's favorite because he's, of all the people in his family, he's the only human being who seems to care for his dad, or at least doesn't abuse his dad. And so they are walking and trying to find a way to some place where there is water and food. And the woman is complaining and yelling and screaming and said, why did I marry you? You're such a worthless human being. You're not a good provider. And finally, and his son is crying and said, Daddy, I'm hungry. I need food. I'm going to faint. Lavana cannot take it anymore. It comes to the point where he says, you know what? If you're hungry, I will feed you. It is my duty to feed you. So why don't you two go and sit under the tree? And I'm going to cook something for you. Wait for 2 hours. And after 2 hours, come behind this tree and you will find some meat waiting for you. And you can eat it, eat as much as you want, and then carry on in your journey. I'm sure you will find your destination. So the mother and the boy go and find a place to sit. And he goes behind a tree, a little distance away, starts a fire. And his plan is that he would sacrifice himself, jump into the fire and sacrifice himself, so his wife and his son will have something to eat. And he has raised a fire, and he is just about to jump into the fire. And it's his final moment. And suddenly his whole life flashes in front of his eyes. He thinks about a long time ago when he was a king, and he had a beautiful queen and very kind children, and that everybody loved him, and that he was a just and noble ruler, and his enemies were scared of him. And he thought about all the good things that had happened in his life. And then he also remembered the 17 or 18 years that he has spent with this woman, his now wife. And this entire life flashing before his eyes, he takes a deep breath and jumps into the fire. And that moment he opens his eyes, and he is once again back in the courtyard. His wife, the queen, is sitting right next to him. He looks at his body. He's dressed like a king. He's sitting on his throne. His favorite minister is there. All the people who were there in the afternoon are right there next to, in front of him. The only person he cannot see is the sorcerer, who's no longer there. And his ministers are looking at him stunned, and one of his ministers is asking him, King, what has happened? King Lavana, what is wrong? Are you okay? And the king is startled. He just cannot understand what's happening, and he looks around and says, "Where's the sorcerer?" And they all look around, and nobody has seen him leave, but he's not there. And that's when the king realizes that the magic that had happened was the illusion of time and space, because he asks his minister, how long was I gone? When did I come back here? What happened to my wife and my son? Are they still hungry? And the minister is looking at him like all surprised. Sir, your queen is right next to you, and your children are playing in the garden with their peers, with their friends. And he says, how long has it been? He says, how long has it been since what? Since the sorcerer started his magic. He said, nothing happened. We saw this. The sorcerer said, look into my eyes. We heard a scream from you the next minute, and there you are. So the whole thing, the whole experience had happened in his mind, and so the story goes. So I'm just thinking about how fascinating that story is, that illusion of time and space, and sometimes I find myself living an entire life in my dreams. Anyway, that was one of the most fascinating stories I have ever come across, and I'm so happy to be sharing that with you. All right, ciao.